The term uppity used to get us killed. Now we're out here using it on each other like it's some sort of joke. That's not culture. That's conditioning.
Hi lovelies, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Belinda Burrs or Belly the Channel. Don't forget to please subscribe to this channel, turn on notifications so that anytime I upload videos, you will be the first person to be notified. To my returning subscribers, to those people that share my videos, leave commentaries, and educate each and every one of us, you guys are the real MVP. So lovelies, I'm gonna be your today's host, and I have so many statistics to put up here, and we're gonna come out to talk about it. Alright lovelies, let's dive into today's video.
The term uppity used to get us killed. Now we're out here using it on each other like it's some sort of joke. That's not culture. That's conditioning. In slavery, uppity wasn't about ego. It really meant you forgot your place. You looked a white man in the eye. You refused to step off the sidewalk. You demanded fair pay. That was all it took for a mob to form, a job to vanish, for a noose to appear. Jim Crow took the same word and stapled it to anybody black who dared to move like they belonged anywhere. A degree? Uppity. A suit? Uppity. Owning property in the wrong zip code? Definitely uppity. It was a label that came with a target. They didn't just brand us with it, though. They fed it to us until we could say it without them in the room. Now we call our own people whitewashed for speaking clearly. We clown somebody for acting different just because they travel, they read, or they build something bigger than what we've seen before. We side-eye confidence like it's betrayal. That's not protecting the culture, that's policing it. That's passing down the fear that they planted, teaching each other to shrink, so nobody mistakes us for thinking that we're better. But here's the truth. They were never afraid of arrogance. They were afraid of proof. Proof that we could be powerful, educated, unstoppable, and unapologetically black. So when you hear uppity or whitewashed tossed your way, understand that it's not really an insult. It's a confession. It's them admitting that they see you walking in a power that they were told that you were never supposed to have. And the only thing worse than them saying it is us believing it.
I find the conversation around Tyler being called an uppity African very interesting because I can narrate my experience as an African that lives in Australia very similar. Because mind you, whenever I tell people that I come from the most privileged country in Africa, the first thing that goes into their mind is how. Because when they associate where I come from, when they see me, is with a struggle story, and a struggle story that came from a origin that had disparity, poverty, and war and conflict. A couple of months ago, I made a video about how in Australia currently, we're going through a crisis that has to do with housing, domestic violence, racism, discrimination, and obviously so many issues that are affecting our society. Guess what the response was? You should be grateful you're even allowed in this country, because where you come from, you were dying of poverty, starvation, because this society was created by white men for me to be able to live safe and free. Mind you, where I come from, I can do exactly the exact same thing. I'm not facing any persecution of disparity or oppression. They associate that with my origin story. And that's how some of these people view African people of African descent. They associate you with a token version of what they think you should be, and that's how they view you to always be less than them. Please never be afraid to take up space. Never be afraid to occupy the space that you deserve and you've worked hard for you to acquire. Pay no attention to these people that tell you that you should be grateful for the things that you deserve.
Phrases you didn't know had racist connotations, part 3. Uppity. Uppity is used to describe someone who is snobby. But this was once a derogatory term to describe a black person by white Southern Americans during the Jim Crow era, where racial segregation was legalized. They used this term to describe black people who they felt were out of their place, acting above their level, not really staying where black people needed to stay.
Calling somebody an uppity African is wild, because I didn't know that my African friends were uppity. I thought they were just cool people that was helping me to educate myself on a lot of things that I didn't know, because I didn't learn them in school here in the States. But now I find out they uppity. The VMA has just taught me something new. If you are an African person and you confident and you know who you are and you not dusty, you uppity. That's new for me. So, I think all African people should just update their bio and just put uppity African. It don't matter if you're in Nigeria, Ghana, South Africa, cough, cough. Put in your bio, uppity African. No matter where you at, on the continent, even if you're in the States, just put uppity African. Just to piss the Americans off. I mean, just come on. Because, because apparently y'all dusty. Y'all uncivilized. Y'all live in mud huts. Y'all got lions as pets. Just saying.
Biggie, I know everything about American culture and not by choice. It was shoved up my throat from a young age. And you guys will be so surprised how much we looked up to you, how much we idolized you. You were all we saw on the TV. The first album I bought was The Carter 3 with my own money as a child in high school. I know all about American culture. I know all about Black Brits culture. I have studied every black in the diaspora, their experience, how they got there, from colonization to slavery to apartheid. The problem with you guys is we thought you were the blueprint, but all you knew was yourself. The American education system fucked you guys up so much. You are uneducatable. You resemble your masters. People like to say, oh, Americans this, and we will exclude the African American community, but you guys are one thing. You guys are one thing. You spent your life thinking too much of yourself, and that has fucked you all up. Everybody in the diaspora is telling you guys, yes, you used to be the blueprint, but no more. Because you refuse to be educated about a world that is educated about you. We have seen your decline. We saw you at your peak, where you created a culture that was mesmerizing, that we loved. Now it's just going down. It's about, they're not like us. They're appropriating us. It's like those mean girls who see another new girl come into the school and they start to be jealous of another girl instead of embracing and educating that girl about the system. It has turned into bullies, and we saw it with Drake. Gave most of his life to American culture. Suddenly he's appropriating because he became bigger than African Americans. Suddenly he's not like you. But what the world is trying to tell you is that Tyler, Drake's, and those alike will continue to be global superstars with or without the support of the African American community. In fact, they might even become the faces of African American culture, because it's declining. Instead of supporting No Money, instead of supporting all these, what's her name, like Coco Jones, all these talented artists you have, you spend all your time bullying Tyler, trying to act like she must just worship the ground you walk on, when the ground you walk on is just fucked up. The difference between you and I is that I know you, but you don't know nothing about me, and you choose not to know. So I have an advantage over you. I can mimic you and pretend to be you to the world, but you can't.
Africans are uppity, and as a proud uppity African, it is my privilege to share some of the key historical icons and reasons as to why we're perceived to be uppity across the global West and even within Africa. And to be honest, it's always an ironic fact, not lost on Africans, that whilst in many European countries the pomp and circumstance and the reverence for cultures is often idealized or romanticized, but the same grace isn't given to African countries. So I kind of wanted to kind of point out some reasons as to why that happens and how that sometimes translates when engaging with other groups of society and people from different cultures. So with Africans, first I wanted to kind of point out some of the key uppity Africans that I personally love. So we can go historical, like Mansa Musa, we have Tutankhamun, we have Cleopatra, Nefertiti, but of course many different African kingdoms. But moving on to more recent celebrities, we have of course the Mummy of Lagos, Bobrisky. We have Chanel Ayan from the Real Housewives of Dubai. We have young, famous and African cast. movies like Coming to America, which are kind of a comedic and Americanized way of depicting an uppity African. Black Panther, last year in Dirty December, there was a whole diaspora war between British girls and Lagos girls. That whole Madam Joyce thing, and actually that one Nollywood clip about like you forgot your class, like that is so uppity African. Like there are many African celebrities that are living in Africa and famous in Africa that represent this African uppityness. In the UK, you could argue that kind of Tamelo or UK Thanos, especially her first interview when she refused to be shaken by the interviewer, was a showing of uppity Africanness. This South African creator explained how uppity Africanness works in South Africa. Although I don't necessarily think it's just a South African thing, I do think that the way that East and South Africans act is a bit nuanced and different to Nigerians, but of course there's so much reverence for Nigerian culture within Nigeria and throughout the world. For example, Yoruba culture is so widely recognized. Nigerian dressmaking is always about structure and making people look luxurious. The Ijaw tribe from Nigeria and their recently popularized wedding tradition where women can't smile until they're satisfied with the amount of money. Even situations like when Beyonce released Black is King but didn't release it in Africa and didn't tour in Africa, and Africans kind of hit back saying, we don't need this if it's like we didn't ask for this, so if you're not going to give it to us, then why bother? Not that all Africans didn't like the music, I love the music, but the point was, again, like there was this idea that Africans would see this to be charity work that was needed, when it, as much as we love Beyonce across Africa, that specific situation wasn't something that we were begging for, type thing. And I think there are multiple reasons as to why uppity Africanness is the way it is, and the why it's so jarring in the West. So Africans across Africa, there's so many different African regions, countries, tribes, histories. We are all united by our struggle in colonization across Africa by Europeans, and the brutality that we faced in all the different countries, and in some ways continue to face in various places. And a big part of colonization was the erasure of our pride for ourselves, our people, our tribes, our conversion to European religions, our being forced to reject our cultural practices, our cultural names. And so our uppityness is kind of a way of rebelling against the Western imperialist idea that there's one way to act, and that way to act is Western, and it's based in Western values and Western morals. And us rejecting that and being proud of our African heritage is a way to say, no, it's not about the West, it's about us. So it's kind of a fight against imperialism and our history of colonization and our expression of our pride in our freedom. The histories of various African places is not really shared globally. There are so many countries which are still going through really, really horrific enslavement and torture and corruption and war. Civil wars and genocides are something which has been seen across Africa. So keeping pride in ourselves is just something which keeps us going, if that makes sense. And I think it's jarring in the West because there's this idea that a group of people coming from war-torn countries are supposed to move to the West and grovel and have nothing and be poverty-stricken, which for some Africans is the truth. But even then, that insinuates that we're supposed to come humbly with no opinions, with no sense of autonomy, with no sense of personal wants, and with no personal agenda. And that's just not the truth. Many Africans that now choose to migrate and travel and engage with the Western world come from abundance. And so that's just not their reality. But even if it was their reality, there's never any need for any person from any country to come begging and to come to be humbled and to stoop and to grovel and to be below. And I think it really triggers different groups of people because of our refusal to do that, even though that's the perception of what Africans are or who Africans should be. Of course, Tyler has become a massive symbol for the pride we have in being uppity, in her rejection of, you know, the labels that Americans put on her. But she's not really uppity. And a lot of South Africans made the point that you don't even know South African celebrities, because the South African celebrities in Johannesburg alone are like washing their hands with champagne, throwing their watches into champagne, like real uppity shit. And I do think that the tensions caused between like Black Americans and Africans is that, like, the history of Black Americans in America is that there was an expectation that Black Americans had to be humble, and there was no room for them to challenge white people in America without violence, death occurring, or torture. And so I think it puts them in a really difficult and painful place where, like, it's kind of triggering to see people that are so closely reflected in who you are maybe have some privileges you don't have, which is completely fair and fine. And I do think Africans have to learn to hold space for that, and hold space for understanding that. And I'm not saying Africans don't, but like, I think there's better ways we can both engage with each other in terms of how do we honor the pain and the history of African Americans and Black Americans. And I also think with uppity Africanness, it does often go hand in hand with tribalism and then classism, which are two issues which we definitely need to find ways to separate from our pride in our cultures against oppression, which I think Africans generally speaking are good at, but I just think it's something to keep a note of. At least I'm good at, but like, I know in the continent classism is still a massive issue, and tribalism is something which has stopped Pan-Africanism within Africa. So as much as we can celebrate being uppity, I do think it's important for us to take some time to interrogate some of the negative aspects of being uppity and how we can better engage with different people from different cultures, especially in the diaspora. So, yeah.
Black Americans know this word well, Uppity. It was never just a word. It was a weapon, a brand, a target pointed on your back. In slavery, Uppity meant you forgot your place. It meant you look a white man in the eyes. You refused to step off the sidewalk. You dared to ask for fair pay. That is all it took for a mob to form, for a job to vanish, for a nose to appear. When Jim Crow rode around, the world traveled with us. They stamped it to anyone who dared to move like they belong anywhere. A degree, uppity. A suit, uppity. Owning a property in the wrong zip code, uppity. Definitely uppity. It was a label that carried danger, but it was also a confession. A confession that black people who demanded dignity shook the entire system. They wasn't afraid of arrogancy. They were afraid of proof. Proof that we could be powerful, educated, unstoppable, unpolitically black. And here's the strategy. They didn't just brand us with it. They trained us to use it ourselves, to feed it to each other even when they wasn't in the room. Now we clown out someone for talking white, for reading too much, for traveling, for dressing sharp, for building something bigger than we have ever seen before. We cite high confidence like it's betrayal. We tell each other don't act better than us, when in truth we are just passing down the fear they planted centuries ago. That is not protecting the culture. That is policing it. That is conditioning. That is slavery ghost whispering through our tongues. And it shows up across the diaspora, not just in America. Let me explain. I live in Australia as an African immigrant, and every time I tell people I come from one of the most privileged countries in Africa, the first thing people ask is, how? They can't compute it. They see African through one lens only: struggle, poverty, starvation, war, conflict. They expect a story of disparity. They expect to be performed gratitude just for being allowed in their country. A couple months ago, I made a video about the real issues Australia is facing: housing shortage, domestic violence, racism, discrimination. And do you know what the comments were? You should be grateful you are even allowed in this country. Where you come from, you did be dying of poverty. This society was built by white men so you could live safe and free. Think about that. A society dealing with its own collapse, its own injustice, tells me to shut my mouth because of a ment about where I come from. I know what I left. I know what exists at home. And I also know I could be doing the exact same things in my home country without persecution. But they have locked me in a token narrative. To them, an African is always a charity case, always a rescue story, never a human being with agency. That is how conditioning works, just like Uppity was failed to enslave Africans in America. Gratitude is failed to Africans abroad. Is the same silencing mechanism wearing a different marks. In one case, you are told don't get too big. In other, you are told be thankful you are here. But the goal is the same. Shrink yourself, occupy less space, accept less than what you deserve. And it doesn't stop at the borders of one country. In the US, in the UK, in the Canada, in the Europe, you hear it too. Black immigrants get told at least you are not back home starving. Black Americans get told you should be grateful for what you have now. It's a global script and is designed to keep us doubting ourselves, checking our confidence, policing our own growth. That is why the word Uppity matters so much. Because it's not just history, it's the blueprint. In slavery, it was you forgot your place. Today is you should be grateful. Both are weapons against black progress. Both are tools of contentment. Both are confessions that the sight of black excellency still rattles the foundation of the world. Here's what people don't want to admit. They were never afraid of arrogancy. They were afraid of proof. Proof that we could be more than the stories they wrote about us. Proof that we could strive outside the boxes they built. Proof that their system of oppression didn't erase our brilliance. They only delayed its arrival. So when someone calls you uppity today, when they smell that you are acting white because you are educated, when they tell you be grateful because you are in a Western country, don't take it as an insult. Hear it for what it really is, a confession. A confession that they see power in you they were told you could never have. The only thing worse than them saying it is us believing it. The only thing worse than their narrative is us carrying it forever, because when we repeat those words, when we laugh at someone for daring to dream bigger, when we label them whitewashed for speaking clearly, when we drag them back down instead of lifting them up, we are doing the work of our oppressors for them. That is not culture, that is conditioning. That is centuries of fear distinguished as tradition. And here's the truth. Black people have nothing to apologize for. Not for being educated, not for being confident, not for being ambitious, not for succeeding, not for taking up space. Every inch of space we occupy has been earned 100 times over. Every degree, every home, every passport stamp, every business, every work of art, it all stands as proof. Proof that we were always capable. Proof that they lied when they said we couldn't. So never shrink. Never bow your head to make someone else comfortable. Never confuse that discomfort with your arrogance. They are not afraid of you being too much. They are afraid of you being undeniable. And here's the irony. They keep saying be grateful, but gratitude was never our problem. We know to be grateful, but what they really mean is be silent. What they really mean is don't challenge us. Gratitude is not the same as obedience. Gratitude does not mean erasing yourself. Gratitude does not mean surrendering the dignity that belongs to you. So to every black American who ever been called uppity, to every African in the diaspora who is being told you should be grateful, understand this. They are not handling your labels because of who you are. They are handling your labels because of what they see in you. And what they see is terrifies them. They see power, they see intelligence, they see resilience, they see the living contradiction to every stereotype they have ever been fed. They see proof. And proof is dangerous. Proof is contagious. Proof can't be contained once it's visible. That is why they try to kill it in the past. That is why they try to shame it now. But proof always finds a way to shine. So don't waste your breath fighting the label. Live a way that makes the label meaningless. Take up the space you have earned. Speak in the voice you have been given. Build the life that proves them wrong without apology. Because the truth is, uppity is not an insult. Grateful is not a lash. Both are confessions that you have broken the mood, and only thing worse than them saying it is you believing it.
And if you watched up to this extent, don't forget to please leave me your own thought in the comment section of what you think of this video. And please do not forget that we do not support any form of bullying and harassment. We are just here for educational and informative purposes. So lovelies, why not just share your thought? Subscribe to this channel if you're yet to do that, and I will see you lovelies when I upload the next one.